In just 50 years, 30% of the British population in the 19th century lost their jobs in agriculture, all because of the Industrial Revolution. How will the AI revolution affect our industry, that is business-to-business sales? That's what today's podcast will be about. My name is Maciej Durczak, and this is the Sales Insiders podcast. Let's get started. I have to admit that recently I got into a bit of a conflict with a colleague. We had a very heated discussion about whether AI will take salespeople's jobs. It's a difficult topic, and I thought it would be a pretty good reason to record a podcast about it, and at the same time reflect on what the work of salespeople will look like in the next few years, because that's what will really determine our role, the role of sales professionals in these processes. And the way this process looks will determine our role and our involvement in it. Another problem is that it's hard to find any reliable and meaningful research on this topic. I'll tell you why in just a moment. Right now, you can see on the screen a report that was conducted on a fairly large group of people. They examined 19,000 different types of tasks that these teams perform. However, these are rather broadly defined categories, because what exactly is the IT category? We tend to think of IT as computer specialists, but when someone talks to me about IT, I often say that IT is a bit like medicine. That is, we won't send an ophthalmologist to perform a kidney transplant. That's pretty logical, and it's the same with IT. It has a whole range of branches, all kinds of specializations, and the impact will certainly be significant in many areas, but it's hard to estimate just how significant, and it's also hard to predict how many new areas will emerge. So let's pause here for a moment and think about this more deeply, because I thought it would be worthwhile in this context to consider how the work of salespeople will look in 2030, meaning in a not so distant 5-year time horizon. Starting from the beginning of this process, that is from marketing, let's virtually move to the year 2030 so we can imagine what our routine, everyday work will look like in 2030. In 3 teams, in marketing, in sales, and in sales management. What will change in marketing? First of all, by 2030, content generation will become very commonplace. Things like videos, articles, various types of graphics, blogs, basically we'll be able to generate all of this very easily using automation and literally flood the internet with it. This will also mean that the value of this content will drastically decrease. In other words, there will be so much of this generated junk, and the entry barrier will be so low that the value will automatically drop as well, because if we multiply 10-fold, thank you, or 100-fold what others are doing, the value really drops dramatically. However, in marketing, hyper-personalization will emerge. Today, as you probably know, we create personas. Marketing automation systems can create various types of personalized emails, meaning that if we have marketing automation and a group or cohort of customer data, we can prepare specific emails for those customers. The system can recognize whether a customer is interested in this or that, or whether they would be a good fit for a given product. And in this way, thanks to that, it can feed the customer with such data. This is all great, but hyper-personalization means that if we are a large network, a big e-commerce company, and we have 3 million customers or contacts in Poland, we can send 3 million different emails. That's what hyper-personalization is all about, and it will be possible because we will have enormous access to data. This is already happening to some extent, but the problem is that we still have relatively little data, and contrary to what everyone thinks, we actually know relatively little about our customers. Exactly, and while we're on the topic of data, something called data enrichment will emerge, meaning we'll be able to significantly enhance our data through web scraping and by using AI systems that will be able to search for information about our customers. And today we collect this information, for example, in e-commerce by tracking what users click on, through marketing automation, whether they read our case studies that we sent them, and so on and so forth. But imagine that such a system is able to track this live. What our client is doing, for example, they issued a press release announcing they're entering a new industry. The system will automatically recognize this and determine that we also have interesting solutions for that industry, and it will recommend this in marketing automation to nurture that lead with information about a specific product. Today, this might seem like science fiction, but by 2030, this technology is expected to become commonplace. Data enrichment will, of course, be important in many areas. For example, if one of our clients changes industries, ventures into something new, or undergoes personnel changes, we are able to find this information, for instance, on LinkedIn, or the AI system will be able to find it on LinkedIn, and it will automatically update certain things in the marketing automation system. This is what's called dynamic lead scoring. Today, we know lead scoring, and the problem with lead scoring is that it's calculated manually. We assign points for certain actions, These points accumulate, and then if the system determines that a given lead is ready, that lead is transferred to the CRM system where salespeople can work on it. And this is quite a nice solution, but it's still in its infancy. If we think about what this will look like in 2030, lead scoring will be dynamic, meaning it will be based on a 360-degree view of the customer, both in our systems where we have data and all the data that can be pulled from the internet. This scoring will be updated dynamically and will be much more precise simply because we'll have more data for it. So as you can see, marketing in 2030 will be highly, highly automated. Let's move on to what we like most, sales. When it comes to sales, we'll be dealing with three main trends. The first will be AI and CRM, the second will be augmented selling, and the third will be predictive selling. Let's say a few words about each of them now. What is AI and CRM? Of course, some of you will say you already have AI in your CRM, but in 2030, it will be on a completely different level. Imagine that you're working in your CRM, and in reality, most of the activities you do manually today, things you have to enter, tasks you have to spend time on, all that manual work will all be automated. That is, the trend is that we're moving toward the complete elimination of everything that is manual work for us, what we have to enter manually, and what simply reduces operational efficiency. So adding tasks, updating pipelines, adding various types of nodes, all of this will mostly be automated because we'll have a customer 360 view. That is a kind of video customer 360, which will feed the CRM and update data about our clients and about what has recently happened. If we make a call, of course, these methods will also, because we'll have transcriptions of our conversations, which, by the way, many providers already offer today. Don't ask about GDPR because that's a completely different issue. Also, imagine that we have something called augmented selling. Augmented selling, that is extended sales, means that the CRM assists us in some way. There are two concepts here, augmented selling and assisted selling. Two types of such extended and assisted sales, meaning that every time you work, when you talk to the client, the system automatically gives you advice in some way. Imagine that you're on a call with your client using something like Teams. The client asks a question, and the system on the side suggests which sales techniques you can currently use or what you can say about a specific product. So this is live support for the process you're currently working on. Additionally, if you have a particular client, then just like in marketing automation, the lead scoring or account scoring can change based on the industry the client works in or based on information the system finds. These records can be updated online. So for example, we have an account for Mr. Smith. He works at a company that, let's say, manufactures tires, and he has just changed his position. He moved to another department, got promoted, and is now more important. The system will automatically notify you that it might be worth reaching out to him because he is your ambassador in that company, and you can introduce new products and offer him cross-selling. This is something that is really very interesting. Additionally, the system can help you here with things like cross-selling, selling a greater number of projects. Here, we're really entering the realm of predictive selling, and that's the next trend I wanted to talk about. Predictive selling means the system can automatically recognize behavioral trends and customer needs. That is, based on the vast amount of data we will have, the system will automatically suggest whether a given client might be interested in another product from your portfolio. Or, for example, you have a client from the financial sector who has your product X, and the system knows that most of your clients in this sector have not only product X, but also Y and Z, while this one client does not. That's why the system will automatically notify you that it's worth doing something in this area and talking to this client. In general, you will be guided step by step through the sales process because the system will have these processes built in and will show you what should happen at each stage, additionally supporting this with data that will allow it to adjust behavior, because you really have to remember that implementing a CRM is a behavioral change, meaning we want salespeople to act in accordance with the process, and AI will be able to refine this even further. So the process will take place, but it will also be supplemented with data from AI, external data, data from our systems and databases, and it will be able to suggest what you should do at each stage to be even more effective. After all, you don't have to deal with routine tasks and regular things and assignments because those, of course, are automated. So we eliminate everything that is manual work, writing, filling things in, and so on. I'm not saying it will be 100%, but in a very large percentage, this will definitely happen. Additionally, as we move along our pipeline and work with clients, the system automatically suggests what you should do. But these aren't hard-coded suggestions. They're dynamic recommendations based on what artificial intelligence currently knows about a given client, about a given situation, about a client segment, or about a particular industry. It has learned. It can literally guide you step by step, but also help you simply be more efficient in this process. Okay, besides the fact that AI will guide you step by step and help you be more efficient in your work, It will also do a lot of cool things on its own, meaning it will warm up leads. If you have your own leads or sales processes and a salesperson doesn't contact a given client for too long, the system can automatically nurture them with some information that will keep them warm. In other words, if we don't call the client for 2 weeks, the system reminds us about it, but it also sends them, for example, a case study about the product they're interested in so they can read it, keeping the client always available and engaged, and essentially maintaining the warmth of that client. We know that warming up leads is not only important, but also that warming up clients during the sales process or our prospects is very important. So artificial intelligence will be able to do this independently. It will also be able to independently make offers to clients. For example, if a client contacts us via chatbot and writes that they need an offer for a specific product, artificial intelligence will send them such an offer on its own and then register it in our CRM as a new sales process. Of course, if we want that, the automation process always depends on our needs. Or do you imagine the bigger picture as a CRM system where you log in and have a whole bunch of your own assistants in the form of artificial intelligence? One sends offers to clients, another warms up leads for you, supplements them with content, meaning the so-called content box, sends you information in real time, a third fills in routine tasks, a fourth generates reports for you, and really you enter this kind of central console where everything around you happens automatically. Now that's the future. Let's move on. All right, we're reaching the next stage of sales. We've gone through marketing, we've gone through sales, and now we're reaching the third stage, which is sales management. Managers will have a similar situation. They will enter their work as if into a central console where they manage their salespeople, but it's AI that suggests to them the performance of individual salespeople. That is, today we often do benchmarking using reporting or some BI systems, which show us at which stage of the process. I think I recently talked about this during the podcast on reporting, which I encourage you to check out. We can do a drill down, go deeper, look at which stage of the process a given salesperson is having trouble and how we can support them at that point. However, in the AI era of 2030, we enter the system and ask it in our natural language what's going on, which salesperson is struggling more, or we simply want to see some insights from the last 3 months about how our team is working, and we'll just get those insights. There will also be a much better integrated database in most companies. That is, today, as I mentioned to you in the podcast about reporting, most companies are like little islands of scattered data throughout the organization, but these will be very well integrated. You will have the ability to benchmark data and query it using natural language. You will be able to query your BI system databases about what is happening there, and artificial intelligence will tell you what strategic decisions you could make based not only on the data you have, but also on what is happening in the current market realities. This really creates huge advantages. So the work of a manager will be about drawing insights, observations, various kinds of suggestions from artificial intelligence regarding team performance, the way the team works, but also about what is happening on the market and how we can develop our company better. This will already be the case in 2030. And if we think about this in the context of comprehensive, holistic sales management, since we've gone through marketing, sales, and sales management, it really sounds amazing. But let's go further. All right, so the question arises, what will the role of a salesperson be in 2035? First of all, as I mentioned to you, this will be a person who comes in, will have a whole team of assistants to work with, and in reality, he will play the role of an orchestrator. Today, we already talk about orchestration systems and advanced workflow systems, about AI agents, and so on. However, the human, as the one who possesses emotional intelligence, creativity, and the ability for strategic thinking, these three qualities will be extremely important for them. The ability to orchestrate all the data received from artificial intelligence in order to further increase the efficiency of the sales process will also be crucial. So if you think about this as a whole, the productivity of individual salespeople will increase many times over because the things we have to do manually today, as well as the information we currently lack, since we can't extract it in real time, will be available to us literally on the fly, exactly when we need it. All right, now that you're all fired up and convinced that by 2030 your work will be easier, better, and AI will do 90% of the job for you, we need to subject this opinion to a bit of criticism. First of all, as I mentioned to you, I was looking for some interesting reports that we could base this conversation on, discuss, talk about, and reflect upon. Which of these areas are ready for implementation, which are not, and what the real impact of artificial intelligence on what we do will actually be. And there's one problem with them. Namely, 95% of these reports are produced by companies that sell artificial intelligence. It's like ordering a report on the future of the Polish national team from the Polish Football Association. We can all guess what it would look like, and we all know what the Polish national football team actually looks like. I am very skeptical about the data presented there because it's hard for them to be reliable. Today, if you go on LinkedIn and see how many experts with years of experience in AI have appeared there in the last 2 years, people who just 3 months ago were doing something completely different, it's a bit frightening. And similarly, on a macro scale, this is how it works in large organizations. I don't want to name names, but we have huge consulting firms that produce such reports. They do this to push and force organizations to start using artificial intelligence as quickly as possible. Because there is huge money involved, it's a massive market, and there are enormous budgets being allocated to this today. Not long ago, I think I distinctly mentioned on LinkedIn a very interesting report I found on CIO.com, which actually shared some truly insightful and important data, clearly stating that a significant 88% of proof of concept projects that make it to the POC stage never leave the testing phase, meaning only 12% go into production. And even among those 12%, there is a significant risk that they will never achieve ROI or return on investment. This means that out of 100 projects that we start testing, perhaps only about 3% actually deliver any real benefit and generate profit for the company. Of course, we're talking about AI projects here. Now imagine someone comes to you and says, invest 1 million zlotys in some technology, but the chance that this technology will actually make any money is just 3%. There's a 97% chance you'll lose the entire million. Most people in business would think that's crazy, but in artificial intelligence, this is considered normal. We're convinced that CRM and all these automation systems, marketing automation and so on, will do everything for us. I really enjoy those opinions on LinkedIn where AI and sales coaches say that if you're going out to clients and selling, then you're a sucker and you really don't know anything about modern sales. I wouldn't want to say who's really the sucker in this situation, but if we look at mature organizations that make excellent use of both human and technological resources, you could say they're the best in the world at it. For example, national intelligence agencies, I won't name countries, but we know which special services are the best in the world at this. They obviously use electronic intelligence and so-called OSINT, but they also rely on what's called HUMINT, that is human intelligence, and they will probably continue to use it for a very, very long time. But as long as technology can't get inside people's heads and read what's written there, that absolutely means the crucial human-to-human relationship will always remain extremely important and utterly essential. And personally, calling clients and physically visiting clients will still continue to be a fundamental and irreplaceable aspect of business interactions. It will remain an advantage. What's more, I recently read an article, which if I can find it, I'll link below this video, about a company that organizes training sessions on how to talk to people on the phone for Gen Z. This means that the younger generation spends so much time on their phones that they don't even know how to use them to call and talk to someone like one person to another. And they actually need to be trained in this. This means that companies that know how to do this, that know how to talk to people, will automatically have a big advantage. All right, I've already criticized AI a bit. First, I hyped you up a bit. I said it would do a lot. Then I criticized it a little. And the truth, unfortunately, as usual, lies somewhere in the middle. We have to invest a lot in technology so we don't get left behind. We need to invest in CRMs, in marketing automation, in artificial intelligence, but wisely, preferably by using out-of-the-box solutions that vendors add to CRMs or to the various systems we use. But let's answer the question I asked at the beginning. Will AI take salespeople's jobs? In my opinion, yes, yes, and no. The first, yes, it will take jobs because a very large volume of transactions, and this isn't just about AI, though AI will certainly help with this, is already happening automatically. Even today, companies buy a lot of software and products entirely on their own. They simply go to websites and make purchases of whatever they're interested in. As an interesting fact, I can tell you that 2024 was the first year in history when more than half of large transactions in the United States, which are defined as transactions of $1 million or more, were conducted through online stores. So just imagine the majority, about 51 or 52% of customers were spending over $1 million. It's very important to note that this only applies to the IT industry who made purchases through self-service, whether it was in a vendor's store or within the application itself, because remember, this also includes various types of cross-selling and upselling, that is buying additional features for the platform, but the customers do this on their own. Today in Poland, it seems kind of abstract that a client could spend $1 million on software simply by paying themselves, swiping a card, but it's only a matter of time before this starts happening. So this self-service is very important. And of course, from the company's perspective, it's beneficial because we don't have to pay salespeople to handle such transactions. And unfortunately, that's the harsh truth. Most companies actually desire this, as you can see from the market. AI will, of course, help with this because chatbots will be able to talk to the client and generate an offer. Based on this offer, the client could even negotiate a discount with such a chatbot, place an order online, and completely bypass the salesperson in the process. That was the first yes. The second yes, even in cases where, as I mentioned, the salesperson is the orchestrator and is really the final link in this complex process, orchestrating and coordinating all these things in more complex sales projects, meaning those that are less routine. He is the most important one there, and in fact, without him, the process cannot take place. But let's remember that if up until now today, we have 20 people in such a sales team, by 2030, we might only need 4 because there will be no need to hire those other 16 people since, as I said, the productivity of these salespeople will increase dramatically. If someone doesn't believe it, just look at what's happening today in the IT industry among programmers. Not long ago, juniors were highly sought after and companies were looking for people who could handle minor programming tasks and support the more experienced programmers, the seniors. But today, these days, juniors are hardly being sought after anymore because all that work is now done by artificial intelligence, and a single experienced, strong developer, a senior developer, can do the work of 5 developers. As a result, overall, we need fewer developers. As I told you, yes, yes, and no. Why not? I recently heard a really great saying: AI won't take salespeople's jobs, but salespeople who use AI will take the jobs of those who don't. We have to remember that if routine tasks, as I said, the first yes, if routine tasks and self-service take over, then fewer salespeople will be needed. Second, increased efficiency, greater efficiency among salespeople will make this profession perhaps more prestigious, but it will also mean that fewer salespeople are needed. So we have a third factor, which is that we will still be needed for very complex processes, as well as for those industries that don't even exist yet today. I actually started this whole discussion of ours with the Industrial Revolution. I'd like to share some very interesting data with you. In 1800, about 10 million people lived in the UK, and unemployment was around 20%. As we know, the Industrial Revolution released a mass of people from agriculture and forced them to look for work in factories. Today, and these are figures from 2023, there are almost 7 times more Britons, 67 million, and the unemployment rate is not 20%, but just 3.5%. As you can see, the Industrial Revolution, which people were very afraid of, created entirely new, enormous branches of industry that we couldn't even have imagined before. And it might be the same with AI. AI will generate a whole range of different things, many of which are still hard for us to even guess at today. But just to give you a little teaser, you all surely know B2B, B2C, that is business to business, business to customer, and B2G, which is business to government. These are 3 things that already exist today that we already work with. But the third thing I can mention to you, the fourth is B2M. If you haven't come across this term, it means business to machines. Imagine that according to Gartner's estimates, by 2030, 22% of purchases worldwide will be made by machines. That is, imagine a large factory that needs to keep a lot of things in stock. And in order not to involve people in the entire purchasing process, searching for everything, an algorithm will simply search online stores and wholesalers and will order from stock whatever it needs. On a smaller scale, your smart fridge at home could order food for you by considering and analyzing what you currently have in the fridge. Smart cars will be able to schedule their own service appointments at the nearest service center they find. Why am I talking about this? Because if 22% of purchases worldwide are going to be made by machines, it means that businesses will have to communicate with those machines. And that's why it's called business to machines. However, this is a huge branch that could emerge. The democratization of software. Let me give you an example from journalism. 20 years ago, if you wanted to get into journalism, you had to buy yourself a camera and a professional microphone. And those were really big investments. Besides, we didn't really have anywhere to publish what we produced. Today, all you need is a phone, a microphone, and you can be a creator. Anyone can be a creator. The media have become democratized. The media have become absolutely democratized. Today, anyone can grab a phone and be a journalist anywhere in the world. The same thing is about to happen with software. It will be very easy to create software simply by talking to machines. That means you'll be able to talk to a computer, and that computer will create the applications you need. Already today, low-code and no-code platforms are emerging. And there are already the first solutions, for example, from Zoho, such as Zoho Creator, where you can tell it what kind of application you want it to build for you, and it will literally assemble it from building blocks. Today, these are still preliminary types of products, but by 2030, the democratization of software will be at a much higher level, and each of you will be able to talk to machines and ask them to create some apps. Just imagine how many new solutions could emerge, how many new niches, how many new industries. It's really hard to even imagine that today. To sum up, yes, AI will take jobs away from salespeople, but it might actually create even more work for them. So they may lose their jobs in one place, but there will be much, much, much more work in new industries that don't even exist yet today. Finally, I'll show you one more interesting report that I managed to find. This report shows how AI will impact employment. But here you have a question where respondents were asked whether they agree with the following statement. Artificial intelligence will inevitably lead to the creation of many new professions and numerous new jobs in my country. Sorry, I got a little bit stuck on that particular thought for a moment. Now take a look at this chart. It's quite interesting because the Chinese are leading here. 77% of Chinese people believe that AI will create new jobs. As we know today, it is in fact a global Silicon Valley, and they are the ones driving technology in the world today. And the average in Europe, which unfortunately is currently our less developed region in the world, sad as it is to admit, the average is about 30%. So on average, 30% of Europeans believe that AI will create new jobs, whereas Asia dominates here, including China, Thailand, and Indonesia. Somehow Turkey ended up at the top here. India is also ranked very high. And I find it quite telling that the belief in AI creating new jobs is not the strongest in Europe. I believe that it will create new jobs and that there will be a great many of them, including for salespeople. That's all for today. Remember to subscribe because a lot of people watch us, but very few actually subscribe. So I would really appreciate it. The algorithms we talked about today, unfortunately, are ruthless. See you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.